My name is Aaron Beighle. I'm going to talk a little bit about some active assessments and some ideas related to assessment that we can use in physical education. And again, it's going to be short and sweet. And at the end, we will do a raffle like you've normally done if you've ever been to any of these. And then we'll remind you about this equipment being 50% off and on sale. All right, so in general with assessments in physical education, we need to make them efficient because I'm sure you've all seen it, and if you're like me, you did it when you were teaching. You spend a lot of time trying to collect these data when the kids could be active. So we need efficient, useful, not just data that we collect to sit on top of a cabinet somewhere, and making it meaningful and informative and process-based when we can. And by process-based, I mean focusing on basically your cues and skills, those types of, that type of information as you go through your program. Bob's going to talk about at some point here. We have just finished changing over putting some lesson plans online, and then we also have a lot of assessments with them, so they will be available. And those assessments that go with each of the lessons come in one of these forms, either teacher questioning, teacher checklist, self-assessment, peer assessment, written exit, or written bike rack. I'm going to talk about each one of these and show you what we mean by that. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly, but I'll be hanging around if you have more questions when I'm finished. For teacher questioning, pretty straightforward, you ask questions. And then you can see on this is the I can statement. I can name at least one of the established physical education procedures. This would be something you would assess kids on at the beginning of your school year. You have your procedures, you go over those procedures, and then you assess them. These are all part of the grade level outcome document. They're all part of their national standards as well. Understanding class procedures, being able to follow class procedures. So you would have questions like, can you show me the position of what it means when I say freeze? So you have your students lined up ready to go and you say, what does it look like when I freeze? And they all put their hands on their knees. That means they know. Now, with teacher questioning, it makes some people a little uncomfortable because they don't collect data. You can get data if you want to count if you want, but it doesn't always. You can get a general idea if kids are getting this or not. So this is teacher questioning, very simple. Gives you good feedback of whether kids are getting that. You can see if a whistle blows 2 times, show me with your fingers how many people should be in your group. We have an activity called Whistle Mixer. You blow the whistle 2 times, they get with partners. So they should be able to go like this, and you can look down the line and see. Or you can even have kids, if you're not sure you think they'll cheat and look at their neighbors, have them turn their back and put 2 fingers behind their back so that you can tell, wow, that kid has no idea what Whistle Mixer means, right? Okay. These are just examples of teacher questioning. Here's another one. I can identify activities that may be challenging for me. Again, these are group discussions. You can have individual discussions. You can have partners discuss it. But just talking about what is easy, what is difficult. A kindergartner doesn't need to know what challenging necessarily means, but you start the process of understanding what easy means and what difficult means, and this process of learning that you're going to have challenges and that it's okay to have challenges. This just stimulates that discussion. Okay? So this is teacher questioning, pretty foundational. Then you have teacher checklist. Teacher checklist mostly will go with your psychomotor skills. This is just, you can see on this, this is just a snapshot of it. It's an Excel spreadsheet. You have your students over here. These are your cues. This is what I mean by process-based. These cues aren't magical. They're whatever cues you have. They're not magical to us and what we have in our curriculum. But you have these cues, and then at the top, so right here, I would look at student A. I don't mark what they're doing. I mark what they're not doing, because most of your kids are going to be doing most of these things because you've taught them. So you assess, and I'm watching, and I'm seeing what volleyball-related skills, and you're doing settings. So that I can statement, it says I can volley a ball in the air using an overhead pass, demonstrating 2 of 4 cues. So as a teacher, I watch, and I see this kid is not, the elbows aren't out. They have their elbows in for their set. So you put a mark there. At the end of this, once you've gone through and looked at all students, you can look over here and say, wow, this kid is missing 2 of them. This child's missing 3. Or you can look at the bottom and see fingertips. I need to go over that again. 9 of the kids aren't doing that with their fingertips. All right? So quick, easy. You just watch and check. And you can put this on Excel and you can just do 1-1. You have it on your laptop, iPad, whatever you have this week that you can use for technology, okay? This is just another example of it, basketball related. It doesn't have to be. You can do this with skipping. This is, again, by process based. This is what I'm worried about. You can we talked about this in the motivation session. Kids can experience success when you focus on these. If you focus on how many times they throw a ball and hit a target, they're going to end up stepping like this and hit a target, and they say, 10 out of 10, look at me. Well, that's not what we want. We want them to show some stepping in opposition and throwing. So, again, assessing the process is tremendously important for helping kids feel successful. This is just another one. These are just cardiovascular. The I can statement, if you can't read that, says I can demonstrate 3 cardiovascular activities. So you ask them, do a cardiovascular activity, and if you had 2 kids doing push-ups, guess what they don't understand? What cardiovascular is, right? And you know that instantly. But you watch and see, okay, obviously this kid did not do it the first time. So now I see this that has no understanding of cardiovascular. Most of the kids will have it because you've gone over it a million times. This is an example of a self-assessment. You can see on this, if you're using pedometers, which plate worked best for you? So you can cut this in half. This is designed to go on a half sheet. And they go and they circle which one. There's no right or wrong. Some kids, the pedometer will work right over their waist. Some will work on their hip. Some will work on their back. But they know this. And now you can look at this and you can save this. And later on, Joey comes back and he keeps putting his pedometer in the wrong spot. Like, look, Joey, you said this one worked. And then you can talk to them about where their placement should be. So this is these are real data that you can show people. Don't just put them on your filing cabinet. This is another one that Bob and I worked back and forth and talked a lot about. This is a self-assessment, and what we want to show here is they assess themselves. You can't read this, but it says, I was able to show appropriate etiquette and behavior during the dance activities, okay? So basically I wasn't a jerk. But you want them to be able to determine whether they're refining that, are they practicing that, or are they just learning? This goes away from, some people have this connotation that I got it, I'm at the end of it. We don't want to send that message with kids and skills. We want them to understand that you learn something, you keep practicing it, and you keep refining it. You never get there. And that's the learning process, right? So some kids will they'll circle refining. Great. But we want them to understand that you're not done. We're going to take this skill and etiquette, we're going to put it in other contexts, and you're going to have to keep showing that you have that etiquette, and keep showing those. Another way you can do this, and some of you have seen this is my art attempt here. This is your door of your gym, and pretend your doors go out. And as kids line up, you can say, how many of you think you're able to demonstrate etiquette or meet this I can statement? And as they leave, they just touch where they think they are. This is some borrowed from Don Hellison stuff, if you've seen some of his stuff with personal social responsibility. But you can step back as a teacher and watch. We just did this with a bunch of second graders at a school close to our university, and he said most of these kids don't have a clue what they're doing. I said, I understand that, but wait till they're in the 5th grade. And he said, yes, 5th graders can start to understand this. He said, most of the second graders just want to touch the highest one, right? Because that's fun, which is fine. We're starting to let them, they're still in this process down here. They're just learning how this assessment process works. Eventually, they'll start to be more honest with themselves. This is another self-assessment. This just says that you give them this sheet and they rank 1 through 6. One of the outcome on this is I can rate my enjoyment of various track and field activities. Enjoyment is a big part of Standard 5. So if you look at these, they rank them where they think number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No right and wrong answers. This is where you get to send the message to your kids that all activity is good activity, and they get to make a choice what they like. Some of them will say hurdles are their favorite, and some of them will say that's their worst. That's fine, but they're learning how to rank them, and that's important. We want them, and we want to see this. You want to see this. If you're going to do another lesson 2-3 weeks later, this is great to know. It might be that your teaching wasn't very good on the hurdles, and that's why they don't like it. The hurdles could have been too high. Find out that information, but you don't know that until you start with these assessments. This is another self-assessment, dribbling with your feet. This is, or a peer assessment, sorry. So my peer watches me. You can call this a scouting time, kind of a sport lingo where you're scouting your peer and watching them, and you rate your peer whether they're refining, practicing, learning on each of the cues. Again, goes back to the process-based, focusing on those cues. Now, as you're a teacher and you're teaching, you walk around and little Joey is writing R next to his peers, and you're watching the peer and it's like, no, he's not doing any of that, Joey. Then you know either Joey doesn't understand these cues, and the kid obviously doesn't understand the cues as well. So that older kids, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they can start evaluating themselves and evaluating their peers. And then their peers can have a conversation about it as well. All right, so this is peer assessment. You can do this just check marks if you don't want to do the refining, practicing, and learning. This is another peer assessment. I did something similar to this earlier today in here, where they just walk and talk. The I can statement is I can persuade others to adopt an active lifestyle. It's one of the outcomes. We want them to be able to persuade and talk about the benefits of activity. What are 3 reasons you should be active? Hopefully by the time you do this, you've talked about a lot of reasons they should be active. And they should be able to, they know those 3 activities. Based on that, they have, tell me if you've ever heard of an elevator speech. Okay, we want to take the stairs, right? So we're going to call them a stairwell speech. and you want them to start walking with their peer, and they have to convince their peer to be active in 1 minute. And they get to convey that. They're active, we're sending this message, we have an I can't statement, and then you have some clarity. This one, you can print out and give them as they walk so they remember what a stairwell speech is and that kind of thing. Again, this is content we want them to know, and we can assess them and get them assessed actively. So this is another peer assessment in short. This is another written exit slip. You guys have all probably seen this one. This one says, I can identify walking as a lifetime activity. And it just says, circle the pictures that show walking as a healthy activity. Pretty straightforward, but you know you have kids that they'll mess some of these up, right? So we can have these data, and you have this, you can do this on a half sheet. You can make these are really easy to make when I made these, and put different pictures on there if you want to do it with some other activity. But again, this is just a written exit slip that they fill out when they leave. This is one as you get into 4th and 5th grade and you've talked about cool down and warm up, and this is again in the GLOs. Circle the reasons we cool down, and hopefully they will know these and they can circle them real quick, boom, 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 they're done. I don't want them sitting right in a paragraph because that takes time out of being active. I want to maximize my activity, but I want to get some data as well. So this is a great way to get data. This one is a little bit of writing, but not much. It's just write one rule modification that helps tennis be a lifetime activity. So you've talked about, maybe we let it have 2 bounces. I worked in a fitness center when I was teaching and coaching, and these ladies just couldn't imagine why we would ever let it tap in 2 bounces. They were complaining because they couldn't play tennis, but they didn't want 2 bounces. Like, that's not real tennis. Like, well, you can't play real tennis, so how about we do double bounces? And they eventually did it, and it worked, and they loved it. And this is just, again, getting them to think. It says, I can evaluate the necessary rule modifications needed to make tennis a lifetime activity. So sometimes it works. Some other activities you could do a lifetime. You could have this on football. Is it a lifetime activity? How could you change it to make it a lifetime activity? Getting them to think about modifications they can make. All right, this one's my favorite. This is compliment corner. So in the corner of your gym, you can just have it labeled compliment corner. And any activity you want to do, you do this. During the activity, you have Post-it notes over there and pencils, and if they hear someone give a compliment or they give a compliment, they run over, write that compliment, and stick it on the board. One of the activities, one of the GLOs is complimenting others. This changes the culture of your PE class. They get to go over and write the compliment. And at the end of the class, you take a picture of it, and you have all the compliments, and you talk about the compliments they gave. That changes the culture. Kids start giving more and more compliments, and it just becomes part of what kids do. All right, so this one's during the fitness, and thanks for being our partner, way to work hard, nice form, and Renee said good choice. So you've talked about the importance of choices they make during fitness, and so you talk about that with students. This one is, if you've ever been to any trainings, sometimes they'll have parking lots where they have pieces of paper around. If you have a question, you go write it down if you didn't get answered. Instead of a parking lot, we call it a bike rack. And in this situation, so I have a fitness station. We have fitness circuits in our curriculum. And one of the stations, the cone looks like that. Instead of having a sign that says do push-up challenges, it'll just say this. It's a whiteboard. And it says, how can we make physical activity more enjoyable? And they write down their ideas. Trust me, you want to take pictures of this because they're going to put things down here that will make you want to make it more enjoyable. Ideas. I think one of here is play with friends, change the rules. You talked about that, hopefully. Include everyone. Add music. Those are things that kids will think of, and you're like, wow, I never thought of that. And you'll have this. And you've talked about these as well. How can we make physical activity more enjoyable? Doing it with a friend. For some people, that's great. Some people don't like it. They want to be by themselves. That's okay. That's a personal choice. But this is a written bike rack. Again, at the end of the class period, take a picture and then wipe it off, and the next class it's ready to go. All right? So, that was fast. So these are the take-home message. See what I did there with the picture of the house? See? Take-home message. I worked hard on that, you guys. Okay, thank you for getting it. Useful, efficient, informative, meaningful, and process-based. I've talked about that. Again, trying to get yourself some data that is meaningful. It doesn't have to be written data. It can be data in your head that you see, wow, I've asked this question and no one had a clue. Been there, done that. In university classes happens a lot. Ask a question at the end of class and like, no, we don't remember you talking about that. Like, it was 5 minutes ago, I can show you the slide, but they don't remember. So it's helpful to do these types of things and get this assessment and get your information because this will inform your changes. If you're just making your changes based on feel, you're going to get yourself in trouble. You're not going to make the right changes that you want to make. Change them based on data that you get from students.